Good morning. Yeah. I'm glad to be here. I'm a storyteller, and I travel around the country and I tell stories. I'm a strong believer that storytelling connects us, it makes sense of the world, and it provides us with a way to find the compassion and empathy for people in situations. Storytelling is such a powerful tool, and people do it all the time. Sometimes they just don't realize they're doing it. And it has always been with us. I tell a lot of folk tales because there's so many messages in folk tales from around the world, many different cultures, and storytelling connect cultures, connect us. And so I tell folk tales, fairy tales, I write stories, but I'm going to share a folk tale with you. It's an Italian folk tale I found in a real old book. And life is like a folk tale, you see. Many of you came here and you discovered, oh, my friend's here. I haven't seen you in a long time. Oh, you know so-and-so? Oh, so-and-so and I grew up together. And those are those connections. And stories lead us down that trail because in folk tales, there's always somebody that comes out of nowhere to help somebody who's in distress, you know. So you're traveling along on this journey, and there's somebody that comes out and gives you a piece of string, and you put it in your pocket, and a short while later somebody gives you a cup, and you put it in your pocket, and then you find yourself in a place where you need a cup, and then you need some string to tie back a door so you can slip out, and you go, wow, I'm so glad I met that person along the way. So the story is called Mezzi Gallo. Can you say that? Which means small rooster. Once there was a rooster, and his name was and he lived on his farm. And one day it was so hot. He was looking for a place to cool out. He saw a great big tree and a patch of shade underneath that tree. Well, Mezzi Gallo thought he'd go and stand in that shady spot. So he walked across that farmyard, and he stood there on one leg, like roosters do. When all of a sudden an acorn fell and hit Mezzi Gallo right on his head. Bam! Mezzi Gallo realized at once that he should see the world before it's too late. So Mezzi Gallo, he left that farm and all that he knew and all that was familiar to him. He walked down a dirt road. He walked by an old abandoned farmhouse. He walked by an old burned-out barn. He walked across a field where there was a long stone wall. He was just about to cross over a bridge when he saw the first living thing that day. It was a sheep on the side of the road going, "Meh, meh," tears rolling down his cheeks as big as pearls. Mezzi Gallo said, "Whatever makes you carry on like that?" And the sheep said, "It's the wolf. It's a wolf. He's taking my kids, and I know he's eating them. Meh, meh." "Well," said Mezzi Gallo, "how did such a terrible thing ever happen?" For ever since Mezzi Gallo had gotten hit with that acorn, he had an immense curiosity about everything under the sun. "Well, it was like this. I was taking my milk to my neighbor's house so he could turn it into cheese. I said to my kids before I left, I said, 'Now listen, if there's a knock at the door, you ought to look under the crack of that door. If you see my furry white feet, you'll know it's me. That wolf, that scoundrel, he got some white linen wrapped all around his feet. When he knocked on that door, my poor kids looked under the crack of that door. They saw that white linen. They thought it was their dear mother. Bah, bah." "Well," said Mezzi Gallo, "it sounds like you should join me and see the world before it's too late. You never know. Might be a surprise or two in it for you." And the sheep joined Mezzi Gallo, and they walked over that bridge. And as soon as they got over the bridge, right on the side of the road was a donkey, stamping his feet in the dirt and baying up at the sky. "Ee-yaw, ee-yaw, ee-yaw." Mezzi Gallo said, "Whatever makes you carry on like that?" "I would like to know too," said the sheep. "Well, I've been fired. I've been let go. I've got no way of making a living." Well, the sheep realized the donkey's problems weren't worth a hill of beans compared to her own, but still she was interested. "Whatever happened? It was like this. I was taking 2 sacks of chestnuts to the market for my master when all of a sudden this horrible-looking monster came running down the side of a hill. He had rags all over himself, just blowing in the wind. It frightened me so, I dropped the sacks of chestnuts. That monster scooped them up and ran off. When I got to the market and told my master what happened, he booted me out and fired me. Now I've got no way of making a living. Well, said Mezzigallo, it sounds like you should join us and see the world. You never know. Might be a surprise or two in it for you. And the donkey joined the sheep and Mezzigallo, and they started walking down the road. And the donkey said, "What's that in the road ahead?" And the sheep said, "What's that in the road? Ahead?" And it was. It was a cat laying in the middle of the road, and he had his head sitting on one paw, and he had one unblinking eye. Well, Mezzigallo walked up to that cat and said, "Whatever happened to you? It looks like you've been squeezed through an olive press." Well, the cat stood up to its full height and said, "Well, I was passing the time of day with this wolf. We were talking about the weather and politics. When all of a sudden it had some sort of fit or something, it attacked me. I fought him off with all my might, but I lost my eye." Well, said Mezzigallo, it sounds like you should join us and see the world before it's too late. You never know. Might be a surprise in it for you, too. And the cat joined the sheep, the donkey, and Mezzigallo, and they started walking down the hill. And the donkey said, "That looks like a dog in the road." And the cat said, "Let sleeping dogs lie." And the sheep said, "It's not asleep." And they walked over to that dog, and that dog was just wavering back and forth, back and forth. Mezzigallo said, "Whatever happened to you? You look a wreck." "I am a wreck. I was sitting here minding my business when I was attacked by a wolf. At the bark, 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 bark. I barked myself barkless." Well, said Mezzigallo, it sounds like you should join us and see the world before it's too late. You never know. Might be a surprise or two in it for you. And the dog joined the cat, the sheep, the donkey, and Mezzigallo, and started walking down a path into the woods. And they came up on a little old brook. And they walked alongside that brook. That brook became a river. Then it became a raging river. And it started to get dark. And Mezzigallo said, "We better hurry up and find a place to spend the night before the animals who look for their food at night come out." And then he looked and he said, "I see a light. And if there's a light, that must mean there's a window. And if there's a window, must mean there's a house. Come on." And they ran alongside that raging river till they come to a riverbank. And they looked up on that riverbank, and right on top of that riverbank was the most unusual house. It was all put together with logs and bricks and stones and iron and mud and hay, all just mashed together like that. The sheep looked at that house. The sheep said, "Whoever lives here has an untidy mind. Come on." And they walked over to that house, and they opened the door and they looked in, and all these chicken feathers on the floor. And Mezzigallo said, "These chicken feathers make me nervous. They make me wonder where the chickens are." The donkey said, "Don't pay them any mind. This is just where they keep the livestock. Let's look up in that room." And they walked further into that house, and they walked up some steps. And they opened the door and they looked in, and there was a makeshift bed on the floor. Then there was a chest of drawers. Then there was a painting on the wall. And right below that painting it said, "Grandmama." And they looked up. It was a painting of a ferocious wolf with big fang-like teeth, had on a red kerchief. "This is the wolf's house." The cat said, "Good thing we saw part of the world because now it's definitely too late." The sheep said, "Let's run away, let's run away." The dog said, "I sense danger, I sense danger. Let's hide, let's hide." Quickly, Mezzigallo blew the light out in the window, and he flew up on the door jamb above the door. The dog hid behind the cedar chest. The cat jumped into the fireplace with its one unblinking eye. The sheep went up and hid up. The sheep went up and hid up in the bedroom. The donkey hid behind the door just in time because the wolf hit the door. The door swung open. And the wolf walked into that house and he said, "Urgh, my light went out. Urgh." And he looked at the fireplace. And you could see that one unblinking eye, the cat. And he thought it was an ember from the fire. And he said, "At least I can stay warm." And the cat went, "Urgh, scratch, 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 scratch." Mezzigallo came off the door jamb. Pack, 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 pack. The dog started barking. Woof, 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 scratch, pack, woof, scratch, pack, woof, scratch, pack. The wolf ran up the steps, opened the door. The sheep came running down, ran into the wolf, knocked him backwards. He fell down the steps. He stood up just in time because the donkey jumped up with its hind legs and licked right into that wolf, knocking that wolf out the house. He rolled down that embankment right into that raging river and got swept away. And those animals, they looked at one another, and before they could say a word, they heard, "Meh, meh, meh," and went over to that cedar chest. And they opened up that cedar chest, and there were 3 baby sheep. And the mother sheep said, "My babies, my babies." Looked at, and there were 2 sacks of chestnuts. And they pulled the chestnuts out the cedar chest. And the cat said, "I wish somebody would find my other eye." And Mezzigallo said, "Friend, I'll be your other eye." And all the other animals said, "We'll all be your other eye." And they cleaned up that house. They got all the chicken feathers off the floor. They took that painting off the wall. They went and they buried it. And they made that house a bit more tidy. And they settled in there that first night, and they had a big, big roasted chestnut dinner. And they lived there still. But if any of you good folks should be out gallivanting, and you cut through the woods, right? And you come up on a little old brook, right? You walk on that brook for a while, then it becomes an old river. You walk a little bit further, it becomes a raging river. Then you see a riverbank. You look up, you see a little old house. It's a bit more tidy now. You go over there, you knock on the door. If no one's there, sit on a stoop. Wait for them. They'll be back. They're just out seeing the world before it's too late. You never know. Might be a surprise in it for you too. Thank you all very much.